Welcome to another video of Optatube. Today, we're diving into something that's become a huge part of modern conflict. It's not fought with tanks or planes, but in the global marketplace. We're talking about energy sanctions. We're going to look at how things like oil and gas get turned into weapons used to push political agendas, sometimes without a single shot ever being fired. So what really happens when these energy markets basically become battlefields? That's the big question we're going to tackle today. Because, modern sanctions, they're not just symbolic gestures. Oh no, they are powerful, powerful economic weapons. They're designed to shake up entire economies, redraw the lines of global trade, and ultimately force political change.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down. We've got 6 key parts. First, we'll get a handle on this new kind of economic warfare. Then we'll see how this weapon has evolved over time. After that, we'll look at what's being called the great rearrangement of energy flows. We'll uncover the sort of hidden levers that make these sanctions actually work. We'll also examine the collateral damage and how markets adapt. And finally, we'll check out the new energy map that's being drawn as we speak. All right, let's jump into part 1, the new economic warfare. We've got to start with the basics, right? What exactly is this weapon and what makes it so incredibly powerful? So, at its heart, an energy sanction is just a restriction. It's when one country, or maybe a whole group of them, puts limits on another country's energy sector. Why? To try and achieve some kind of political goal. But, and this is the key thing, it's about so much more than just trying to turn off the oil taps. What's really fascinating is just how precise these things can be. It's like a surgical strike. They can target a country's ability to even produce energy by blocking access to technology and services. They can block exports of oil, gas, you name it. They can target imports by getting everyone to agree not to buy. Or, and this is where it gets really clever, they can go after the stuff that holds it all together. The shipping, the insurance, and the money. So why the big deal? Why are these sanctions such a powerful tool? Well, reason number 1 is super simple. Energy is absolutely essential. I mean, a country can probably survive without fancy cars or designer clothes, but it just can't function without energy. You need it to power homes, run factories, move people and goods around. It's the lifeblood. Okay, reason number 2. The energy business is insanely expensive. Just think about it for a second. These massive projects, we're talking refineries, pipelines, huge LNG terminals, they cost billions and billions of dollars and take years, sometimes decades to build. Sanctions can come in and just freeze all of that progress in a single moment. And third, the whole energy market is global. It's all connected. A problem in one corner of the world, say the Persian Gulf or deep in Siberia, it doesn't just stay there. Nope, it sends these ripples out across the entire planet, and suddenly the price you're paying at the pump or on your heating bill goes up, even if you're thousands of miles away. And those ripples, well, they lead us right to reason number 4. Energy is a massive driver of inflation. When energy costs more, everything costs more. The cost of growing and shipping your food goes up. The cost of making, well, anything in a factory goes up. And that creates this huge political pressure, not just for the country getting hit with sanctions, but for the countries doing the sanctioning too. Okay, on to part 2. A weapon evolved. Look, using energy as a weapon isn't a new idea, not at all. But the way it's done today, it has changed dramatically. It's gone from being a kind of a blunt hammer to a much, much more surgical tool. This little timeline here gives you a quick sense of that history. You had the 1973 Arab oil embargo. That was a huge wake-up call for the whole world. Then, the long-running sanctions on Iran, they totally reshaped how oil flows around the globe. And then in the 90s, you had the Oil for Food program with Iraq, which really brought home just how complex the human side of all this can be. And this slide really nails the difference between then and now. Back in the day, the strategy was pretty simple. Just ban everything. Stop all the energy from flowing, period. But today, the tools are way more sophisticated. You've got things like price caps, bans on specific tech, financial restrictions. The goal now is often to choke off a country's revenue, while, and this part is absolutely critical, keeping their energy flowing onto the world market. Why? To stop a massive price spike that would hurt everybody. Which brings us to part 3, the great rearrangement. We're about to look at the biggest, most ambitious use of energy sanctions ever tried in human history. We're talking about the recent sanctions on Russia. And let's be super clear about the scale we're talking about here. The coordinated global effort to hit every single part of Russia's energy machine, the oil, the gas, the tech, the financing, It was completely unprecedented. Nobody had ever tried to do something this big, this complex before. So the big question is, what happened? The goal, at least on paper, was to hammer Russia's export revenue. But the reality, as you can kind of see from this chart, was a lot more complicated. The oil didn't just vanish. Instead, it got rerouted. A whole lot of it started flowing to new buyers, especially in Asia, and it basically redrew the map of global trade. And this really gets to maybe the single most important point of this entire discussion. Sanctions have a massive effect, but they tend to change who trades with whom, not if the energy flows at all. The global market is just incredibly good at adapting. And if you find these dynamics of the global energy market just as fascinating as we do, you should definitely follow the Optatube channel. We're always digging into power system modeling and putting out new insights and updates. All right, let's move on to part 4, the invisible levers. So how do these sanctions actually work on a mechanical level? Let's pull back the curtain a bit on the hidden stuff that gives them so much power. Because it's not just about the oil itself, it's about the entire system that moves it around the world. You know, a lot of the time, the most powerful tools are the ones you can't even see. We're talking about the plumbing of the global economy, things like insurance and international finance. Let's take insurance, for example. This is a brilliant, kind of sneaky weapon. Here's how it works. Step 1. A handful of Western companies basically dominate the market for insuring giant oil tankers. So, sanctions cut a country off from that insurance. Step 2. If your giant ship isn't insured, guess what? It can't legally pull into most ports anywhere in the world. And the result? Step 3. Trade just grinds to a halt. It's the perfect example of how controlling the services around energy can be just as powerful as controlling the barrels of oil themselves. Okay, part 5, collateral damage and adaptation. So these are incredibly powerful weapons, but they also have some serious side effects. So let's talk about that collateral damage, and also the really creative and sometimes pretty shady ways that the market finds to get around it all. So who ends up paying the price for all this? Well, a lot of times, it's regular people in the countries imposing the sanctions who are now facing higher energy bills. It's developing nations that suddenly can't afford to buy the fuel they desperately need. And it's that general economic pain that everyone feels when inflation starts to bite. And the market's response to all this, it gets very creative. You start seeing the rise of these so-called shadow fleets, older tankers operating completely outside the normal system, doing these risky ship-to-ship transfers out in the middle of the ocean. Ships get reflagged to hide who owns them. Different types of oil get blended together to disguise where they came from. Like we said, the market, it always finds a way. And that brings us to our last section, part 6, the new energy map. When you put all these forces together, the sanctions, the damage, the clever workarounds, what you get is a fundamental redrawing of the global energy map. It's pushing us toward a future that looks a lot more, well, fragmented. You know, one of the biggest questions right now is what all this means for the energy transition to renewables. And it's tricky. On one hand, you could argue sanctions speed things up, right? Countries get serious about energy independence, so they invest more in wind and solar. But on the other hand, when there's a desperate scramble for fuel, countries might just burn more coal or whatever they can get their hands on, which could actually delay climate goals. It's a really tough trade-off. And this brings us to our final, really crucial point. Sanctions have changed the game. They've turned energy markets into geopolitical battlegrounds for good. They dictate who trades with whom, how that energy gets from point A to point B, and who ends up footing the bill. In this tense world we're living in, it seems pretty clear that energy markets are going to stay battlefields, even as the lights somehow manage to stay on. Thanks for tuning in.